The first phone call came at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning. I almost ignored it. I was standing in the break room at work, trying to make bad coffee taste less like burnt cardboard, when my phone buzzed across the counter. The name on the screen was Earl Jenkins, an old neighbor near my lake cabin. Earl never called unless something was wrong. He texted photos of sunsets, fish, fallen branches, and sometimes raccoons getting into trash cans. But he did not call, so I answered. He did not say hello. He said, "There's a bulldozer at your cabin." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Then he said, "They've got orange tape around the porch. Some woman from the HOA is out there with a contractor. You better get here." My cabin was 47 minutes away if traffic was light. I made it in 38. By the time I turned off the county road toward the lake, I could see the yellow arm of an excavator over the trees. My stomach went cold. There were contractor trucks parked beside the gravel path. Wooden stakes were driven into the ground near the porch. Bright orange demolition tape stretched from the oak tree to the corner post, and taped to the cabin door was a white notice in a plastic sleeve that read, "Unsafe structure, scheduled for removal, Lakeview Pines HOA." My grandfather's cabin was behind that notice. The same cabin he built with his own hands before Lakeview Pines existed. The same cabin where my father taught me to clean fish on newspaper. The same cabin where my mother kept a coffee can full of spare keys, batteries, and matches. The same cabin I paid taxes on every year. It was not abandoned. It was not HOA property. It was not theirs to touch. Karen, the HOA president, was standing near the excavator with a developer representative, a contractor, and a clipboard, like she was overseeing a community improvement project instead of an attempted demolition of private property. I walked straight to the porch and ripped the notice off the door. Karen told me not to enter the work zone. I told her the work zone was my land. She said the cabin had been declared unsafe, non-conforming, and abandoned. She said the board had approved removal. She said Lakeview's $3.8 million recreation expansion could not be delayed by an old shack nobody maintained. Old shack. That was what she called my grandfather's cabin. I asked for the demolition permit. She said the county had been made aware. I asked for the court order. She said the HOA had authority to abate nuisances affecting the community. I asked for proof that the parcel belonged to Lakeview Pines. She looked at the developer representative. He looked at his tablet. Nobody answered. The excavator engine was idling behind them. I did not stand in front of the machine. I did not threaten anyone. I did not swing at the contractor or tear down their stakes. I took out my phone and recorded the notice, the equipment, the contractor trucks, the developer logo, Karen's face, and her saying the cabin was scheduled for removal. Then I called the sheriff. Then I called my attorney. Karen thought she was clearing an eyesore for a $3.8 million project. She did not know my cabin had a recorded deed, a separate tax parcel, old building records, active insurance, current tax payments, and no demolition order from the county. By the end of that week, one emergency injunction would stop the bulldozer, freeze the trail, freeze the kayak launch, freeze the pavilion, freeze the clubhouse expansion, and force Lakeview Pines to admit that their beautiful project rendering had quietly erased land they did not own. My grandfather did not build the cabin because he wanted a lake house. He built it because he wanted a place where nobody could tell him to hurry. That was how he explained it to me when I was a kid. He worked most of his life in a machine shop, standing on concrete floors under fluorescent lights, fixing other people's equipment until his hands were cracked and his back stayed stiff even when he slept. The cabin was his rebellion against schedules, noise, and people who talked too much. It sat on a small lake parcel at the edge of what later became Lakeview Pines. Back then, there was no Lakeview Pines. There was just a narrow county road, a line of scrub oak trees, a few old fishing cabins, and a lake that attracted more mosquitoes than people. My grandfather bought the parcel because nobody else wanted it. The ground was uneven, the access road was rough, and the nearest power line required a utility easement that took him months to arrange. He did not care. He cleared brush. He dug post holes. He found reclaimed lumber. He poured footings with help from 2 friends and a cousin who claimed he knew carpentry because he had once built a chicken coop. The cabin came together slowly. 1 room, then a small kitchen, then a porch, then a little storage room that smelled forever, like gasoline, lake mud, and cedar shavings. It was never fancy. The roof popped in the heat. The windows rattled in storms. The porch leaned just enough that a marble would roll if you set one down. But my grandfather kept everything legal. He pulled the original building permit. He registered the septic. He kept the well record. He paid taxes. He saved every receipt in a cigar box and later in a file folder. When I was young, the cabin felt like another world. No cable, bad radio reception, a dock with splinters, a metal table where we cleaned fish, a sofa with a blanket that always smelled like smoke from the old wood stove. My grandmother hung curtains that faded almost white from the sun. My father carved my height marks into the pantry door until I was old enough to be embarrassed by them. After my grandfather died, the cabin passed to my father. After my father died, it passed to me. By then, Lakeview Pines had grown around it. The developer bought most of the land around the lake and turned it into a polished HOA community. Lakefront homes, stone signs, walking paths, a clubhouse, manicured grass, boat racks, lights along the trails, and glossy brochures showing families kayaking at sunset. The cabin looked out of place next to all that. I knew it. I was not blind. My grandfather's cabin had weathered boards and a roof that needed attention. The dock needed repairs every spring. The gravel path looked plain beside the HOA's landscape trails. But looking old is not the same as being abandoned, and needing repairs is not the same as belonging to someone else. I kept the taxes current. I kept insurance on it. I replaced the porch steps. I fixed 2 windows. I patched the roof after a storm. I paid a contractor to inspect the septic line. I kept the utility account active. I visited when I could, not as often as I wanted, but enough to keep the place alive. Karen did not see any of that. Karen saw a problem in her view. When she became HOA president, Lakeview Pines was preparing what they called the Lakeview Recreation Expansion. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of the community. A wider walking trail loop, kayak launch, picnic pavilion, expanded clubhouse deck, event lawn, landscaping, lighting, and a scenic lake overlook. The price tag was $3.8 million. Residents were told it would raise property values, improve lifestyle amenities, and make Lakeview Pines the most desirable lake community in the county. There was only one problem. My cabin sat near the best lake view. It was not inside the HOA. It was not common area. It was not part of the expansion tract. But on the glossy rendering Karen sent to residents, the cabin was gone. In its place was an open lawn, a trail curve, and a little viewing area with benches. The first time I saw that rendering, I emailed the management company. I asked why my cabin had been removed from the plan. They replied with something vague about conceptual drawings and long-term community improvement goals. Then Karen emailed me directly. She said the structure was deteriorated, inconsistent with community standards, and a possible nuisance. She said the board hoped to resolve the issue cooperatively. Resolve the issue. That was how she referred to my cabin. I told her it was private property and not for sale. A week later, the developer's representative sent me an offer. It was low, insultingly low. The letter called it a voluntary acquisition proposal and said the property's value would be limited because it was surrounded by HOA improvements and aging infrastructure. It also said, accepting early would avoid future complications. Future complications. I kept that letter. At the time, I thought the complication was pressure. I did not realize they were already planning to make the cabin disappear. The pressure started with nuisance letters. At first, they were dressed up as concerns. Lakeview Pines wrote that residents had reported deteriorating exterior conditions at my cabin. Then they said the porch appeared unsafe. Then they said overgrown vegetation affected the lakefront visual corridor. Then they said the structure might be abandoned. I answered every letter. I told them the cabin was private property outside the HOA. I attached tax receipts. I attached proof of insurance. I attached photos of recent repairs. I told them if they had a legitimate safety concern, they could identify the specific issue, but they had no authority to enforce HOA appearance standards on my parcel. Karen did not stop. She filed a code complaint with the county. That part did not scare me by itself. Anyone can file a complaint. A county inspector came out, looked at the porch, the roof, the steps, and the exterior. He noted minor repair items and requested access for a more complete inspection if I wanted to document compliance. He did not condemn the cabin. He did not order demolition. He did not declare it abandoned. He told me, quietly, that older structures near new developments often attracted complaints because they looked bad next to new money. I fixed the porch railing and sent photos. I thought that would end it. It did not. Lakeview Pines announced the $3.8 million expansion at a packed HOA meeting that month. Earl sent me the video because he still knew a few residents. Karen stood beside a projector and talked about the future of the lakefront. The rendering showed a trail passing exactly where my cabin stood. A resident asked about the old cabin. Karen said the board was addressing nuisance and safety issues through appropriate channels. Appropriate channels. That phrase sounds boring until a bulldozer shows up. A few days later, I received another letter from the management company saying the cabin remained a non-conforming structure affecting community planning and safety. It demanded I remove debris, secure the property, and contact the HOA regarding resolution. There was no debris. The property was secured. Resolution meant sell. I refused again. Then everything went quiet for almost 2 weeks. That quiet was not peace. It was preparation. The morning Earl called, the crew had arrived before sunrise. His first photo showed a contractor truck at the gravel path. The second showed orange stakes around the cabin. The third showed the excavator. When I reached the cabin, the scene looked official enough to fool anyone who did not own the land. There was orange demolition tape around the porch, spray-painted marks in the grass, wooden stakes, a printed notice on the door, a contractor with a work order, a developer representative in a branded jacket, Karen with her clipboard. The excavator bucket was resting on the ground 20 feet from the porch. I asked the contractor who hired him. He said Lakeview Pines Development Partners. I asked who authorized work on my parcel. He said the HOA and developer had handled site clearance approvals. I asked whether he had a demolition permit with my name as owner. He looked at the developer representative. The representative said the structure had been identified for removal as part of an approved improvement plan. I asked again for the permit. He said permits were being processed. The excavator was already there. Karen stepped in and told me I was interfering with a safety removal. She said the cabin had been abandoned. I told her I had tax receipts and insurance. She said absentee owners often claim interest only when communities invest in improvement. I told her my grandfather built the cabin before her community existed. She said, that may be, but the county has concerns now. I asked her to show me a county demolition order. She could not. She said the HOA had a duty to protect residents from unsafe structures. I told her residents had no reason to be on my porch. She said the structure affected the lakefront environment and community value. There it was. Not safety, value. The sheriff's deputy arrived while the excavator was still idling. He listened to both sides, looked at the notice, asked for a permit, and asked whether there was a court order. Nobody produced one. He documented the dispute and told the contractor not to proceed until ownership and authorization were clarified. Karen was furious. She said I had delayed a multi-million-dollar community project. I said good. Then I called my attorney again and sent him every photo. His response came within minutes. Do not leave the property until the equipment leaves. We are filing emergency papers today. The first thing my attorney told me was to stop thinking of it as a cabin dispute. He said, "This is a demolition threat." That changed the urgency. If someone damages a fence, you can rebuild a fence. If someone blocks a driveway, you can open it later. If someone bulldozes a structure that has grandfathered status, family history, old permits, and unique location value, you cannot simply put it back the same way. That was irreparable harm. We began assembling the file that afternoon. I pulled the deed from my safe, then the tax records, then the insurance policy, then the old building permit copy my grandfather had saved, then the septic record, then the well registration, then utility bills, then receipts for porch repairs, roof patching, pest control, dock repairs, and gravel work. I found photos from the last 5 years, showing the cabin maintained and used, me replacing the steps, my cousin helping patch the roof, a new lock on the front door, fresh boards on the dock, and the cabin lit up at dusk during a family weekend. Not abandoned, not forgotten, not theirs. My attorney ran a title search. It confirmed exactly what I already knew but needed in official form. The cabin parcel was separate, privately owned, current on taxes, and not part of Lakeview Pines HOA common area. There was no deed transfer, no easement allowing demolition, no covenant placing the structure under HOA architectural control, no agreement giving the developer the right to clear the site. Then he checked the county permit portal. No demolition permit for my parcel, no owner authorization, no condemnation order, no court order, no county abatement order. The code complaint existed, but it did not say what Karen claimed. It noted possible repair items. It did not authorize removal. It did not declare the cabin unsafe for demolition. It did not declare it abandoned. It did not transfer authority to the HOA. That was the heart of the lie. Karen had taken a code complaint and inflated it into a demolition justification. We pulled the Lakeview expansion materials next. The rendering showed the cabin gone. The site plan labeled the surrounding area as future recreation area. The trail alignment crossed near my parcel boundary, and in one version appeared to clip the edge of it. The kayak launch access depended on clearing the sight line near the cabin. The picnic pavilion layout assumed open lake frontage. The developer had designed around a fantasy where my property had already been acquired or erased. Then Earl found something even better. He sent me a recording from a Lakeview meeting. Karen, at the front of the room, said the old cabin issue was being handled through nuisance and safety channels and would not prevent the board from moving forward with the project timeline. Handled. Through nuisance and safety channels. My attorney wrote that phrase down. We requested board minutes. We requested contractor work orders. We sent preservation letters to the HOA, the management company, the developer, the contractor, and the HOA's insurance carrier. The contractor's work order eventually surfaced. Remove old lake cabin, clear site for expansion prep. There was no mention of verifying owner authorization, no mention of a demolition permit, no mention of a court order, just remove old lake cabin, my cabin.
My attorney prepared an emergency petition for a temporary restraining order and injunction.
The arguments were straightforward. Private property, imminent demolition threat, no authorization, no valid permit, no condemnation, misrepresentation of ownership or authority, potential destruction of a unique structure, interference with deeded rights, trespass, and project activity tied to land the HOA did not own. He included photos of the excavator, the notice on the door, the video of Karen, the sheriff report, the deed, the title search, the county permit search, the code report, the expansion rendering, the developer offer letter, and the contractor work order. That last one made me sick every time I looked at it. 5 words can carry a lot of arrogance when written by someone who assumes the owner will not fight. My attorney also contacted my insurance company. If a contractor damaged the property, or if the HOA had misrepresented risk, the insurer needed to know. He notified the county building department that unauthorized demolition equipment had been staged. He contacted code enforcement to clarify that no demolition order existed. The code officer confirmed in writing that the complaint had not resulted in a condemnation or demolition order. That email was gold, because Karen's whole public story depended on the idea that the county had forced her hand. The county had not. By late afternoon, the emergency filing was submitted. The hearing was scheduled quickly because demolition equipment had already been placed on site. The contractor had paused after the deputy's warning. But paused is not safe. Equipment can return. Notices can change. Boards can vote in emergency sessions. Contractors can misunderstand instructions at 6 a.m. I slept at the cabin that night. Not well. Every sound outside made me sit up. But sometime after midnight, sitting at my grandfather's old table under a yellow lamp, I realized something that steadied me. Karen had chosen the one fight where paper mattered more than pressure, and my grandfather had saved the paper. The judge did not need a long speech to understand the problem. My attorney laid it out simply. A private property owner had a recorded deed. A cabin existed on a separate tax parcel. The owner had paid taxes, maintained insurance, and performed repairs. The county had not ordered demolition. No demolition permit existed. The HOA had no jurisdiction over the parcel. The developer's project plan assumed use or removal of land it did not own, and demolition equipment had been staged. If the cabin came down, there was no easy way to undo it. That was irreparable harm. The HOA attorney tried to soften everything. He said the notice was preliminary. The project was in planning phases. Safety concerns existed. The HOA had received resident complaints, and the developer believed the issue would be resolved through proper channels. The judge asked one question: who owns the parcel? The HOA attorney did not say Lakeview Pines, because he could not. Then the judge asked whether there was a demolition permit. No. A condemnation order? No. A signed owner authorization? No. A court order? No. A recorded agreement allowing the HOA or developer to remove the structure? No. That was the hearing. The temporary restraining order was granted. Then, after further submissions, the injunction continued. No demolition. No clearing. No grading. No entry for construction activity. No alteration of the cabin parcel or immediate affected area. No project work relying on the disputed cabin site until ownership, permits, access, and approvals were resolved. One injunction. That was all it took. But it did not freeze only the excavator. It froze the $3.8 million expansion phase. The trail loop could not proceed as designed because it depended on the lakefront alignment near the cabin. The pavilion layout had to be reviewed. The kayak launch access plan was affected. Drainage calculations tied to the open lawn area had to be revised. Donor funding tied to the scenic overlook was paused. Contractor scheduling was disrupted. The county required revised plans excluding my parcel unless lawful acquisition or agreement occurred. Karen called it a technicality. Of course she did. When people violate property rights, they often call the deed a technicality. My attorney called it ownership. The developer suddenly wanted to talk. Not Karen. The developer. Their representative called with a new offer, much higher than the first. He said everyone wanted to avoid unnecessary conflict and preserve the spirit of the project. He said my cabin could be honored with a plaque or integrated into the design if I cooperated. A plaque. After they tried to bulldoze it, I said no. Meanwhile, Lakeview residents began asking questions. The project had been sold to them as approved, funded, and ready. Now they were hearing words like injunction, title issue, no demolition permit, private parcel, redesign, delay costs, legal fees. Karen sent an email saying the expansion had encountered an unexpected legal challenge from an adjacent owner. Unexpected. She had sent letters for months, filed complaints, rejected my responses, ignored my deed, posted a notice, hired contractors, and parked an excavator. Nothing about my ownership was unexpected. It was inconvenient. The county building official confirmed in writing that no demolition permit had been issued, and that any future demolition would require owner authorization or legal authority. Code enforcement confirmed again that the cabin had not been condemned. The title report confirmed the parcel was mine. The injunction confirmed nobody could touch it. The contractor pulled the equipment 2 days later. I stood on the porch and watched the excavator leave. I wish I could say I felt victorious. Mostly, I felt angry at how close it had come. If Earl had not called, if I had been out of town, if the sheriff had arrived after the porch was already crushed, if my grandfather had not saved the records, Karen might have gotten what she wanted and called the rubble compliance. That is the part people need to understand. A bulldozer does not care who is right. It only stops when someone with authority makes it stop. That week, the authority was the injunction. The county inspection after the injunction felt different from the first code complaint. This time, everyone knew the stakes. The building official came to the cabin with a code enforcement officer, my attorney, a representative from my insurance company, the developer's attorney, the HOA attorney, and 2 board members. Karen arrived late, wearing sunglasses and carrying a folder she barely opened. The inspector walked the cabin slowly. He looked at the porch, the roofline, the steps, the door, the windows, the foundation piers, the electrical panel, and the area where the demolition tape had been strung. He noted repair items, but he did not call it abandoned, he did not call it condemned, and he did not call it an immediate danger requiring demolition. He said repairs and inspections could be handled through normal owner compliance, not HOA demolition. That distinction mattered. The code officer confirmed the earlier complaint had been mischaracterized. It had not authorized removal. It had not transferred enforcement power to Lakeview Pines. It had not approved private demolition. The sheriff's report documented the excavator, the notice, the lack of permit presented on site, and the dispute over ownership. The insurance adjuster photographed everything because the attempted demolition staging and trespass created potential claims. The contractor's insurer was notified too. The contractor began distancing himself from the HOA and developer, saying he had relied on their work order and representations. My attorney asked whether he had verified ownership before mobilizing equipment. He did not answer in a way that helped him. Then came the HOA meeting. I almost did not go. I did not want to sit in a room full of people who had been told my cabin was blocking their dream project. But my attorney said residents needed to see the documents. If Karen controlled the story, she would turn the injunction into an attack instead of a consequence. The clubhouse was packed. Karen opened by saying the board remained committed to the recreation expansion, despite legal obstruction by an outside property owner. Then my attorney put the deed on the screen. Separate parcel, private owner, current taxes. Then the county permit search, no demolition permit. Then the code report, no condemnation. Then the insurance document, active policy. Then photos of the cabin repairs, new porch rail, roof patch, door hardware, dock work. Then the developer rendering, cabin missing. Then the contractor work order, remove old lake cabin, clear site for expansion prep. The room got quiet, not silent. Quiet in the way people get when they realize the story they were sold has a hole in the middle. A resident asked whether the HOA owned the cabin parcel. The HOA attorney said no. Another asked whether the county had ordered demolition. No. Another asked whether the board had verified title before including the site in the expansion design. The answer was long and careful, which meant no in a suit. Then a woman near the front asked the question that ended Karen's control of the room. Were we about to bulldoze someone's private cabin? Nobody wanted to answer that. My attorney did. Yes. Karen snapped that it was not that simple, but it was simple enough. The project plan erased a cabin they did not own. The board pressured the owner. A code complaint was exaggerated. A demolition notice was posted. An excavator was staged. A court had to stop it. Residents began asking about money. How much had been spent on designs involving land the HOA did not own? Who approved the contractor? Did the developer rely on Karen's statements? Would legal fees come from dues? Would the project be redesigned? Would donors be refunded? Would insurance cover any of this? The developer representative looked furious, but not at me. That told me something. Karen had promised the cabin issue would be handled. Now everyone knew what handled meant. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to pause the project, comply with the injunction, commission an independent title review, revise plans excluding my parcel, and open an internal review of Karen's handling of the nuisance complaint and demolition preparations. Karen voted against the motion. That vote followed her out of the room. The Lakeview recreation expansion did not die. It became smaller, uglier, more expensive, and much later. That was enough. The original $3.8 million plan had depended on an open lakefront sweep where my cabin stood. Once my parcel was removed, everything shifted. The trail had to curve farther inland. The pavilion moved. The kayak launch path changed. Drainage had to be redesigned. Lighting had to be relocated. The scenic overlook lost the exact view used in the promotional rendering. Redesign costs came first, then delay fees, then legal expenses, then insurance disputes, then resident anger. The HOA and developer eventually settled with me. They paid attorney fees, court costs, title search expenses, inspection costs, and damages related to trespass, demolition threat, and interference with my property. The settlement also required written acknowledgement that my cabin parcel was private, outside HOA jurisdiction, and not subject to Lakeview Pines demolition, architectural, or nuisance authority, except through normal county processes. The developer had to remove my parcel from all project renderings, marketing materials, permit applications, and site plans. The HOA had to send residents a correction letter stating that the cabin was privately owned and had not been condemned by the county. That letter was not written in the language I would have chosen, but it said enough. Karen was removed as HOA president at the next special meeting. She tried to defend herself until the end. She said she acted to protect residents. She said the cabin had been unsafe. She said the project was too important to let one outdated structure control the lakefront. She said the board had relied on professional guidance. A resident asked why she posted a demolition notice without a demolition permit. She did not answer directly. Another asked why the rendering showed the cabin gone if the HOA had not acquired the land. She said it was conceptual. That word did not save her. The contractor lost the Lakeview job and faced complaints for mobilizing demolition equipment without verifying owner authorization. The developer replaced its local project manager. The management company revised its procedures. Lakeview adopted a rule requiring title confirmation, owner authorization, permit verification, and attorney sign-off before any project could affect property outside recorded HOA ownership. It was a good rule, written after my cabin almost came down. As for me, I repaired the cabin. Not because Karen was wrong about everything. The porch did need work, the roof needed more than patching, the dock was tired, and the steps were uneven. Old places require maintenance, and pride is not a substitute for repairs. So I repaired it properly. I hired a local carpenter to rebuild the porch. I replaced bad siding. I painted the trim a deep green close to the color my grandmother used. I fixed the pantry door but kept the height marks. I added a new sign near the gravel path that reads, "Private cabin. Deed recorded. No HOA jurisdiction. Cameras in use." I also framed a copy of the injunction and hung it inside, near the old fishing rods. Maybe that sounds petty. I call it a reminder, because I learned something from all of this. A notice taped to your door is not a court order. A code complaint is not a demolition permit. A rendering is not ownership. A board vote is not a deed. And a multi-million-dollar project does not become more legal because it is expensive. Karen thought the cabin looked weak because it was old. She thought I looked weak because I did not live there full time. She thought my grandfather's documents were dusty history. She thought pressure, confusion, and speed would do what law could not. But old does not mean abandoned. Quiet does not mean absent. And paper, when it is recorded in the right place, can stop steal. I still go to the cabin on Fridays when I can. The Lakeview Trail now curves behind a line of shrubs farther away from my porch. Sometimes residents walk past and look over like they are seeing the cabin for the first time. Some wave, some do not. Karen moved out of her board seat, and eventually out of the neighborhood, according to Earl. The lake looks the same in the morning. Silver water, mist above the dock, and the old oak shading the porch. My grandfather's chair still sits by the window. I used to think the cabin survived because I got lucky, because Earl called, because the deputy documented things, because the attorney moved fast. Those things mattered. But the real reason it survived was simpler. My grandfather kept the deed. He kept the permits. He kept the records. And when the bulldozer came, those quiet papers were stronger than the machine. If an HOA ever calls your cabin abandoned, unsafe, non-conforming, or an eyesore, do not panic, and do not assume they have authority. Ask for the order. Ask for the permit. Ask for the deed. Ask what county record gives them power over your land. If they cannot answer, record everything. Then get an attorney before the engine starts. Because sometimes one injunction is all that stands between your family's history and somebody else's $3.8 million dream.